Hey, Todd here, starting a series on how I shot this, which I will go into detail on everything involved in capturing this image, the tools, the techniques, the software, everything involved, down to the shutter speed I used, the whole thing, f-stop. We're going to get into all of that. And we're starting with this first image, which you can see right here, is from the XGames, shooting for ESPN on this. I used to shoot a bunch of stuff at the XGames. Haven't done it in quite a while. And some of the gear I used on this, I don't even have anymore. But we'll talk about alternatives to what I did use to what you can use nowadays. So let's get into it. First off, let's talk about positioning, logistics, all that kind of stuff. You have to wear, kind of a cool vest. I don't know if it's so cool. I think I was actually supposed to return this, but I think I left before it ended or whatever. But you've got this cool vest on that you have to wear so people know who you are. And then you've got all these other kind of badges and lanyards and stuff you get, and schedules of where they're going to be. And my whole thing is that for me, I don't want to be where everybody else is standing. You're going to see groups of photographers that are in there that want this position, one position. That's not where I want to be. I want to find something different where everybody isn't. Maybe where I'm really not supposed to be. I kind of go where I'm not supposed to be until I get kicked out and I ask for forgiveness later. So that's kind of what I always look for, is to be someplace that everybody else isn't, and getting that angle that everybody else isn't trying to get. So that's kind of my first thing. Is I'll scout the whole location, scout it, figure out where it is. And then if I'm shooting a specific athlete like I was on this shot, I go and I talk to him and I figure out where his run is, where he's going to do his best trick, what trick that is, and all of that. So I know ahead of time where I need to be. Because for this type of a shot that I was doing, you only get one frame each time, maybe two. And because the trick happens so fast, you need to be ready to go. So being in the right spot, talking to the athlete, knowing what the trick is they're going to do, and then being where other people aren't is the key to getting that shot that nobody else is getting. Where I was standing and shooting in this shot, there was nobody else around me. So it was really nice, and I don't think I was actually supposed to be there, but it worked out. And you want to get as much shots off as you can, so you really need to shoot during their practice, because a lot of times you can't be out on the course when TV's rolling, when they're doing it for TV and they clear the course. They tell you got to get out of there because you'll be in the shot on the TV, and they don't like that. So shooting during practice is great. The athlete's not always going to give you the most time you want, so you've got to be ready in your position. That's where scouting it out firsthand and being there ready to go, and that's key to the first whole thing, is getting your position, knowing where you're going to shoot, and being ready for that, and knowing the athlete's trick. And then number two, let's talk about gear. So for this shot, I was shooting with strobe, which I had a Profoto. I had a Pro 7B at the time, and which is a different head than this. This is a B1, which would work. But this, I used a Magnum reflector, which is this big guy right here on the Profoto 7B. Really low power, so I was getting the fastest flash duration I could get, because you want to freeze him. So at that point, it was probably down around, I'd say around 200 watt seconds. It was a 1200 watt second pack, so I was down around 200 watt seconds. And then the big Magnum reflector. And I was using a 15 millimeter fisheye Canon lens at the time. And I used this a lot when I was shooting the X Games, and it got a little bit abused because right now it doesn't even focus anymore. I can't even switch it to autofocus. I think it got banged by something. I got hit by something doing this, and I don't know what it is. I've got to actually send it in to get fixed. But nowadays, I would use this 11 to 24, which they didn't have at the time when I was shooting this. This wasn't out yet, I don't believe, but now I have this, and I would much prefer to use this Canon 11 to 24 millimeter. It's a in its f4. Well, this is 2.8, but anyway, this is a great lens, and I don't even know if I'm going to get that fixed now because I don't really need it. But anyway, I had the Magnum reflector, really low power, so getting that high flash duration. The more you go up in power on the pack, the less flash duration you have, so the more chance of getting something to blur. So it was shot at 2/50th of a second I was really stopped down, I think f14 on this lens is what I could go to. And so that was real, I had a lot of depth of field, so in case I didn't quite get the focus spot, I knew it would be sharp anyway, and then the freezing it. And I did a couple tests beforehand to make sure that was all working, because you got to be ready, because the athlete's only going to do it a certain amount of time, few amount of times, and you got to be ready to get that. So testing beforehand is key to making sure everything's going to work right. Yeah, and then I had my assistant using a Manfrotto monopod. So he had the light out on the stand, holding it up away so that he was holding the head up in the air, and I'd tell him where to be, and we'd move around and be to that. So that was how the head was connected to this. And at the time, you had to hold the battery pack that held the Pro head. So it was super heavy. So he had a lot of work to do that day, and it was hot too. So he was working hard. So that was, and then the 1DX Mark II, I think, was the body I used at the time, which I don't have that anymore. But you can now use, this is a B1. They don't even really sell this Profoto B1 battery powered pack anymore. You could use the Profoto B30, which I believe is a 500 watt power pack, and you could use that at low power, and it gets like 1/16,000th of a second at low power, so you're definitely going to freeze something with that. So I'll put all the equipment in the comments below with what I used and where you can find it or whatever. But I'll put links to that below so you'll have all that information. So that was the gear, the camera, and everything involved in the logistics of that. So now let's talk about capturing the actual image. The timing for capturing the actual image, it takes a while to figure that out. I've been doing this shooting sports and stuff for a lot of years, and I play a lot of sports, have played a lot of sports. So you kind of know when the peak action is going to happen. So you want to actually shoot just a little bit before it happens. So you're capturing that moment at the right time. If you wait till you actually see it, a lot of times you're too late. So you kind of have to anticipate when it's going to happen. And again, that's talking with the athlete and kind of going over what his move's going to be. And they're not always going to do it right every time. So the more you can shoot it, the better, the more images you get of it, especially if you're getting one at a time. I mean, it's great when you're not strobing something, then you just power through, motor drive the hell out of it. And now with these new cameras at 24 frames a second or whatever, I mean, it's huge. You're going to capture it. But when you're doing a one-off shot, you got to anticipate and shoot just millisecond before it's actually doing the trick. So that's kind of the actual capturing the image part, which takes a little time to get used to doing that. But if you start shooting a lot of sports stuff, you get to that point where you just know when you need to shoot. So here we are in Capture One, and here's one of the other images. You can see I was shooting a bunch of them here and testing here and there. And then this is the one which was the best image from this shot. And you can see over here, well, one before, there's no adjustment over here on the exposure, dynamic range, or clarity, or dehaze. So when I actually find the one I like, and we shot this specifically waited for the afternoon to get the sun to have it behind him like that. And you can see over here on the left where you can see the Magnum reflector right there and lighting him up. And over here I've added some contrast over here on the left, added some saturation, bumped up the white a little bit, and moved the levels on the curve in the black, moved that up a bit. And then I always adjust the clarity and the structure just a bit, and it just gives it a crispier look, and then dehaze it a bit as well. So that's a look at the formula I pretty much use for these shots, and then process it out, and then bring it into, let's bring it into Photoshop here. So here's the image right out of Photoshop. You can see my light over here again, everything, which looks good, processed out of there. But then I like to use a plug-in filter, this Nik Collection 8. Then I go to Nik 8 Color Effects. Then I go over to, in their filters, I go to Tonal Contrast. And then you can see right here what that does. So there's without it. Then you add the tonal contrast to it, and it just changes it, which ups the saturation. We're up in the highlights, mid-tone shadows, and the saturation a bit, ups the saturation a bit as well. So that just changes it a little bit more, gives it a little bit more of a punch like that, which I really like. And I really like this software that this Nik Collection to mess around with this tonal contrast. It makes a big difference. So then I output that, and then I've got my crop in Photoshop, and there's the final image right there, cropped and everything. Here's a few more shots you can take a look at using the same technique. And that's number one in the series on how I shot this. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. I appreciate you watching as always. And until next time, I'm out.